The go-kart has no brakes that actually work, and you're already doing 40 miles an hour. You are 8 years old, and the hill behind your father's garage drops away steeper than you remembered it looking from the top. The engine your father welded together from spare parts is screaming somewhere behind your head. Your hands are locked on a steering wheel salvaged from a scrap delivery van. You do not slow down. You do not know how, and some small, dangerous part of you does not want to. The hedge at the bottom of the hill is getting larger every second, and you are laughing, actually laughing, with your heart hammering somewhere up near your throat. You do not know yet that this exact feeling, too fast, not enough control, completely alive, is a thing you will spend the rest of your life chasing. You do not know that it will take you all the way to a circuit in Germany that grown men call the Green Hell, and that on one particular afternoon there, it will very nearly cost you everything. Pull back. But to understand how a boy on a homemade go-kart ends up racing Formula One's fastest and most dangerous machines, you need to go back further still, to your father's garage and the dream that started there. Your father, Tom Sutton, has run a small motor garage in the English Midlands for as long as you can remember. He is not a wealthy man. He is a good mechanic. And on Sundays, when the garage is closed, he lets you sit in his lap and steer his own battered saloon car around the empty car park, teaching you to feel the clutch before you can properly reach the pedals. He built you that go-kart out of parts nobody else wanted. A discarded lawnmower engine, a steering column from a van being scrapped for spares. He never says it out loud, but you understand, even as a boy, that he is trying to hand you something he never had the money to chase himself. Your mother worries every time you disappear behind the garage with your father on a Sunday afternoon, though she never once tells either of you to stop. She simply keeps a tin of plasters by the back door, refilled more often than either of you likes to admit. By the time you're 16, you are racing other boys' go-karts on disused airfields on weekends, winning more often than you lose. By 19, you have talked your way into a seat in Formula Ford, the cheapest and roughest rung on the ladder toward Formula One, funded by every spare pound your father's garage can produce. He comes to every race he can afford the petrol for, standing at the fence with grease still under his fingernails, saying nothing when you win, and saying even less when you crash, because you already know exactly what he is thinking either way. On the drive home after your first real crash, he does not mention the accident once. He only asks whether the corner felt fast enough to be worth it. You tell him it did. He nods and never brings it up again. Years later, you still remember the exact smell of that garage on winter mornings, oil, cold concrete, and your father's tea going cold on the workbench while he worked. Your father sometimes tells you, half joking, that he built that first go-kart at least partly to keep you close to the garage rather than out getting into trouble on the state roads with the other boys your age. You suspect there is more truth in that joke than he has ever fully admitted. Before you go further, if stepping inside history like this is what you're here for, subscribe to POV Chronicles right now. Every story on this channel puts you inside a real moment from the past, researched carefully and brought to life with careful cinematic detail. Now back to the story. You climb through the ranks the way most drivers do in this era, slowly, dangerously, and mostly on other people's money. Formula Ford gives way to Formula 3, raced on a shoestring budget that barely covers new tires most weekends. Formula 3 gives way to a phone call you do not expect, from a small, ambitious team looking for a young driver willing to take risks nobody with a career protect would take. Your father sells his share of the garage to help cover your first season's costs. He never once tells you what that decision costs him personally. He simply turns up at the next race with the same grease under his fingernails, standing at the same kind of fence, further from home than either of you have ever been. The team is small, underfunded, and permanently a season away from folding entirely, but it gives you what larger teams never would this early, a seat and the freedom to prove yourself in it. In the paddock, you meet a French driver named Pierre Lacombe, racing for a rival team. You are both the newest, youngest drivers on the grid that season, both privately terrified, both far too proud to admit it to anyone but each other. You become close the way only two men sharing exactly the same fear can, trading terrible jokes about the danger neither of you ever names directly. This era of the sport does not forgive mistakes. Barriers are wooden fencing or bare earth banks. Fuel tanks split open on impact more often than anyone likes to discuss. In your first full season alone, 3 drivers you have shared a paddock with do not survive the year. Nobody talks about it for long. The next race is always only a week away, and the whole paddock has quietly agreed that dwelling on it helps no one. You and your first Grand Prix points in only your second season, finishing 6th in torrential rain, that half the grid does not finish at all. Pierre finishes 4th and buys you a drink afterward that neither of your salaries can really afford, laughing about it anyway. The two of you toasting a result that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Your mother writes you a letter after every race that season, regardless of the result, always ending with the same line. Come home in one piece, and the rest sorts itself out. You keep every single one of them in the bottom of your travel bag, though you never quite admit that to her. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that settles over you by the end of that first full season. Equal parts physical strain and the constant low-grade awareness that any given weekend could be someone's last. You learn to compartmentalize it the way every driver on the grid eventually does, because there is no other way to keep climbing into the car each Sunday. Pierre keeps a small photograph of his own father taped inside his helmet and shows it to you once, admitting quietly that he has never told anyone else on the grid it is there. The following season, the calendar brings you to the Nürburgring Nordschleife in Germany, a 14-mile circuit to the forest, over 150 corners, nicknamed the Green held by drivers who have raced it and survived. Even in an era that accepts danger as the cost of the sport, this track has a reputation that makes experienced men go quiet in a way no other circuit on the calendar does. Pierre tells you, only half joking, that every driver on the grid has a private list of corners on this track they do not entirely trust. You tell him you have the same list. Neither of you says the obvious thing out loud, which is that the list exists because men have died at every single one of those corners over the years. You walk sections of the track together the evening before practice begins, the way drivers sometimes do at circuits with this kind of reputation, memorizing blind crests and off-camber bends that punish the smallest miscalculation. Pierre points out a fast, deceptive left-hander deep in the forest and admits, quietly, that it is the one corner on the entire lap he still cannot fully trust, even after 2 years of racing here. 2 days before the race, during final practice, Pierre's car leaves the circuit at that exact corner, far from any marshal post, far from any camera. It takes almost 10 minutes for anyone to reach him. By the time you hear the news back in the paddock, the ambulance is already gone. Pierre does not survive. The paddock goes quiet in a way you have never experienced before, not even after the deaths earlier in your career. Officials debate canceling the remaining sessions. Some drivers quietly withdraw from the race entirely, and nobody blames them for it. Team mechanics stand in small clusters, saying very little, the sound of the circuit itself somehow wrong now, too quiet where it should be full of engine noise. Your father finds you sitting alone in the garage that evening, staring at nothing, still holding Pierre's spare gloves that were left on your workbench from a joke earlier that week. He simply sits down beside you without a word, the way he always has, and stays there long after the rest of the paddock has gone quiet for the night. You have to decide, within 48 hours, whether you're going to drive that same circuit yourself. You remember, absurdly, that Pierre still owes you money from a bet placed 2 races earlier, a debt now impossible to ever collect, and the thought nearly breaks you more than anything else that entire evening. You think, standing there in the quiet garage, about every joke the two of you ever made about this exact circuit, and how none of them feel remotely funny anymore. Pierre's mechanics pack away his equipment in near total silence the next morning, nobody quite able to look directly at the empty space where his car should be. Somewhere in the paddock that night, another young driver quietly announces he is walking away from the sport entirely, and for one long moment, you seriously consider doing exactly the same thing. Race morning. You stand beside your car in the pit lane longer than you need to, running one gloved hand along the bodywork the way you have before every race of your career, except this time your hand is not quite steady. Your father checks your harness himself, the way he has done since you were 16 years old racing on disused airfields, except now his hands are not entirely steady either. Neither of you says Pierre's name out loud. You do not need to. The empty garage 2 bays down, where Pierre's car should be sitting, says it clearly enough for both of you. You pull onto the circuit for the formation lap, and the forest closes in around the track almost immediately, trees pressing close on both sides, the crowd barriers little more than rope in places. Spectators along the fence line are unusually silent for a race morning, many of them having followed the news from practice 2 days earlier. You know exactly which corner took Pierre. You will pass it in less than 4 minutes. The starting lights extinguish, and 30 engines fire at once behind you, a wall of sound that swallows every other thought in your head. You are moving before you have consciously decided to be moving, the way your body has learned to do over a decade of racing, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought simply cannot keep pace. The forest blurs past on both sides. Corner after corner arrives faster than thought, faster than fear, muscle memory carrying you through sections of track that would terrify you completely if you had time to actually think about them. Then the corner arrives. You know it the second you see it, the exact bend where Pierre's car left the circuit 2 days ago. For one fraction of a second, your hands almost lift off the wheel entirely, your entire body flinching against a memory that is not even fully your own. Team mechanics along the pit wall watch you go past in near total silence, several of them still wearing the same haunted expression they have carried since practice 2 days earlier. You notice a single wreath of flowers tied to the barrier near the corner, where Pierre's car left the track, placed there sometime in the last 2 days by hands you will never know, and you fix your eyes forward before you reach it. You do not lift off the throttle. You take the corner exactly the way your father taught you on an empty car park before you could reach the pedals. Smooth, committed, trusting the car completely. Because hesitation kills faster than speed ever does on a track like this one. The rest of the lap disappears into pure instinct. Trees, corners, the engine screaming somewhere behind your head. Exactly the way it did on that homemade go-kart a lifetime ago. For 14 miles, there is no room in your mind for grief or fear or anything at all except the very next corner arriving faster than you can properly think about it. Lap after lap, the rhythm of the circuit takes over completely. You stop counting corners somewhere around a halfway mark, your body simply responding to the track the way it has been trained to for over a decade, every reaction arriving before conscious thought has time to catch up. You finish the race in 4th position, one of only a dozen cars that started the race to actually complete every lap without incident. When you finally climb out of the car in the pit lane, your legs do not fully hold your weight, and your father is there instantly, one arm under your shoulder, before you even realize you need it. Neither of you says anything for a long moment. He simply holds on, the way he has held on to you your entire life. Grease still under his fingernails, further from that Midlands garage than either of you ever expected to travel together. You do not feel like you have won anything today. You feel like you have survived something, which on this particular afternoon, on this particular circuit, turns out to be exactly the same thing. Somewhere on the final lap, you catch sight of Pierre's team garage from the track, shutters already half drawn, and you allow yourself exactly 1 full second of grief before the next corner demands your complete attention again. Your father later tells you he counted every single lap from the pit wall with his stopwatch running, the same way he has done since your very first race on a disused airfield, because it was the only thing his hands knew how to do with the fear. You race for 11 more seasons after that afternoon at the Nürburgring. You win races. You lose races. 2 years later, the sport finally agrees the old circuit is too dangerous to hold a Grand Prix again, and the Nordschleife disappears from the calendar for good, a decision that comes 2 years too late for Pierre and for several other men you share a paddock with. Your father stays with you for every one of those 11 seasons, mechanics hands steady on your harness before every single race, until the day you finally retire from the sport that took his savings, his weekends, and very nearly his son. You still think about that go-kart sometimes, the hedge rushing toward you, the laughing, the not knowing yet what any of it would cost. You would not change a single second of it, and some days that surprises you more than anything else about this entire life. If a story like this is what you come to POV Chronicles for, subscribe, like, and share right now. Step into the next one with us. Hit like if that corner in the forest, the one where you almost lifted off the throttle, hit you the way it hit us researching it. And drop a comment below. First, would you have raced that day or walked away? Second, let us know where in the world you're watching this from.